Ms. Greene is recognized for 5 minutes for questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Crane, for pointing out the most important things that people outside of this city talk about. While you all are paid with a taxpayer-funded paycheck, I want you to know that most Americans are concerned exactly about what Mr. Crane talked about. There's also many Americans, like in my home state of Georgia, that are still grieving the death of a young woman named Laken Riley, who was brutally murdered by an illegal alien that came into this country in Venezuela, who had injured a child in New York, was not deported. In my district, fentanyl is a real problem. It's a serious problem. Fentanyl doesn't discriminate based on politics or identity, sexual orientation, or race. Fentanyl is killing people every single day. And it's also something that's extremely concerning for everyone in my district. This is such an outrage to most Americans. And again, they pay all of our paychecks with their hard-earned tax dollars, that our country is under invasion. It is an invasion. Now, while we believe that people should legally immigrate to America and follow the laws, all of our laws are being completely broken. And the fact that over 10 million people have come in our country and there's 2 million gotaways on your watch, 2 million gotaways that are capable of doing something like Mr. Crane just talked about, a terrorist attack, or the daily crime committed against innocent Americans, whether it's a tragic car accident that kills Americans in the car, whether it is a fentanyl poisoning, a murder the fentanyl comes from China to Mexico and comes into our country, or whether it's a brutal murder like what happened to Laken Riley. It's happening every single day. The CBP One app is the most fascinating thing to me. While Congress just banned TikTok, we have this app that our government funds that it's shocking statistics. More than 459,000 individuals have scheduled Southwest border appointments with the CBP One app since January 2023, and 96% of those scheduled appointments with the app were issued a notice to appear and paroled into the country. 96%. The CBP One app is like a welcoming app. Welcome to America. Come on in. You aren't vetting people. We've heard from witnesses before our committee. We heard from one mother whose daughter was horrifically raped and murdered, and the man that raped and murdered her daughter had gang tattoos and cartel tattoos all over him. And he was allowed in the country. And he brutally raped and murdered her daughter, and her daughter's boyfriend still has the voicemail on his phone of her last 2 minutes of life while she was calling him in panic. And that voicemail is her being raped and murdered. This is what our country is dealing with. And it seems to fall on deaf ears when we talk to witnesses like you. It's unbelievable. Ms. Sabatino, according to DHS, applicants for the CHNV program, quote, undergo a clear and robust security vetting, end quote. A clear and robust security vetting. In order to obtain advanced travel authorization through CHNV parole program, an individual provides biometric information, including a photograph, using the CBP One app. Now, on our committee, well, they're all gone, there are Democrats that signed a letter, literally signed a letter, saying that it's unfair, completely unfair that transgender migrants have to provide a photo. That's unfair to them. And they would like to take away the photo requirement on the CBP One app. Are all individuals in the CHNV parole process required to submit biographical information through CBP One?
Biographic and biometric, it's the photo.
Can you imagine not having a photo?
The facial biometric matching is a significant security enhancement to the CBP One app.
Are you keeping criminals out of our country with the CBP One app?
The CBP One app really is just the tool to move the information, but we are taking the biographic and biometric information and matching it against watch lists, our law enforcement's databases, travel data, criminal records, as well as our derogatory photo index.
So do you sleep good at night? Like, do you know for a fact that you're keeping these criminals out of our country with the CBP One app? You're confident that you're keeping out rapists, murderers, cartel members? You're terrorists? You're confident that you're keeping them out of our country?
Congresswoman, as a 26-year career employee, I'm very well aware of the challenges that we are up against, and I sleep well knowing that our CBP officers and frontline personnel are doing their level best to protect the American communities.
So CBP One app processes the information and expedites people from over 160 countries around the world into our country, and you sleep good at night and you're confident in the CBP One app.
The CBP One app doesn't expedite individuals. It actually affords advanced information to our officers to do that robust vetting and screening, and the facial, obtaining the photos to do the facial biometric match to our DROG index.
So you don't think already having the information in an app with the photo, when the migrants can come and select a date and time to come meet with Border Patrol, that doesn't expedite the process? You're saying that's not an expedition of the process?
I think I can highlight a number of instances over the last 10 years where migrants showing up at our ports of entry without any advance information quickly overwhelm our teams and then redirect our teams from doing things like interdicting fentanyl or outbound operations, seizing weapons and currency that funds the cartels. We have a lot of different disciplines and responsibilities at the ports of entry. Without that streamlined modern process, we would be solely focused on processing individuals who are required to afford the opportunity to request asylum at our ports of entry.
Sure, so maybe thousands of people showing up at one time at a port of entry or at the border along the way it would be considered an invasion. That's what most Americans are calling it. And most Americans are against the fact that their taxpayer dollars are having to pay for a handy-dandy app that people can download and enter the information so they can be expedited into America. It's outrageous. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to go ahead and yield. Thank you.
The gentlelady yields.
Gentleman yields. I now recognize Ms. Greene, the gentlelady from Georgia, for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mayorkas, we do not have a country without a secure border, and we cannot have a safe country. We cannot protect our own democracy without protecting our elections. That is a fact. The open border is the #1 issue across America in poll after poll, and that is exactly why this committee impeached you. Mr. Secretary, the Oversight Project released a bombshell report last night on your connection to the dark money NGO industrial complex of illegal immigration. I know you saw this from one of my colleagues just earlier. They found flyers throughout the Resource Center Matamoros refugee camp in Mexico telling illegal aliens, reminder to vote for President Biden when you are in the United States. We need another 4 years of his term to stay open. Eyewitnesses saw the flyers also being handed out to migrants who were using RCM for assistance in coming to the United States. In an audio recording, the founder of RCM, Gabby Zavala, by the way, we maybe should subpoena her to the committee, agreed that they need to help as many people as possible before President Trump gets reelected. RCM is an operation that houses functions for the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, which helps migrants enter the United States, and you're familiar with their work. We know that you served as a former board member of this group that funds illegal immigration. And they're very proud of you, Mr. Secretary. They congratulated you on your nomination. You worked as a board member of an NGO that is working in conjunction with other NGOs, which are not only financing the invasion of the country, but also telling illegal aliens to vote in the United States elections. They are telling illegal aliens, non-citizens, to come vote for Joe Biden. That's your boss. This is corruption at the deepest level. As a matter of fact, I would call it treason. It's treason because these people have declared war on our citizens by raping our women, our children, and murdering people. Like Laken Riley, you're familiar with her, right?
Congressman, our heart breaks.
Are you familiar with Laken Riley?
I am familiar with the case. And
You should have deported her so that she could be alive today. Her parents would have appreciated that. And also Kayla Hamilton, who was brutally raped and murdered by a cartel member. Her mother came and spoke to us. She didn't deport him either. You let him in the country. You, Mr. Secretary, have allowed over 10 million illegals, probably higher than that, could be closer to 15 million, we don't know, to invade our country. You've allowed the cartels to make billions and billions. As a matter of fact, you're probably the best business partner they could ever have. They make all this money in human trafficking and drug trafficking at our border. You've allowed approximately 300 Americans to be murdered every single day from fentanyl that comes across our border. And now you're aiding NGOs to steal our elections through your budget. I demand proof of citizenships in our elections, and that is something every single member of Congress should care about. We don't need illegal aliens voting in our elections. We're supposed to be here talking about your budget, but we're talking about how money is being used to make sure people come into our country are able to get a social security number in which they can register to vote. And on that note, Mr. Mayorkas, I demand that Chuck Schumer holds your impeachment trial in the Senate, because that's exactly what we should be focused on right now. Mr. Chairman, I yield the remainder of my time.
Advisor, but he is not an advisor on policy. He
That's
writes
very confusing
science.
to have someone's title
Right.
and not having that to be their obligation
But
at
that
work.
is the fact, though.
I think that supports what we said. There needs to be more oversight and there needs to be more accountability. Mr. Chairman, my time has expired, but these points are very clear to all of us today in this hearing room. I yield back.
I now recognize Mr. Garcia from California for 5 minutes. Oh, he left? I now recognize Ms. Greene from Georgia for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fauci, you were quoted on CBS Face the Nation saying it's easy to criticize, but they're really criticizing science because I represent science. Do you represent science, Mr. Fauci?
I am a scientist who uses the scientific method to gain information.
Yes, you said you represent science. Do you represent science, Mr. Fauci? Yes
Again,
or no? Yes or no?
No, that's not a yes or no
Yes,
answer.
it's a yes or no.
I don't think it is.
Okay, well, we'll take that as a you don't know what you represent.
Oh,
But this, as director of the NIH, you did sign off on these so-called scientific experiments. And as a dog lover, I want to tell you this is disgusting and evil, what you signed off on, and these experiments that happened to beagles paid for by the American taxpayer. And I want you to know Americans don't pay their taxes for animals to be tortured like this. So the type of science that you are representing, Mr. Fauci, is abhorrent, and it needs to stop. Mr. Fauci, you also represent the type of science where you confess that you made up the COVID rules, including
I didn't hear what you
6
said.
feet social distancing and masking of children.
I never said I made anything up.
You admitted that you made it up. You
I
made it
didn't
up
say
as you went.
I made it up.
So are you saying this is fake news, Mr. Fauci?
I didn't say I made anything up.
What did you say?
I said that it is not based in science and it just appeared.
But this is science.
What does dogs have to do with anything that we're talking about today?
These are scientific experiments. This is what you signed off on. But you also told the American people they had to distance by 6 feet. They had to wear masks. But let's also talk a little bit further about the type of science that you represent. NIH scientists made $710 million in royalties from drug makers, a fact that's been hidden. Let's talk about the fact about, is it right for scientists and doctors getting paid by the American people, government taxpayer paychecks, to get patents where they're paid millions and hundreds of millions of dollars in royalty fees, especially when the NIH and these government agencies, most powerful agencies in our country, are recommending medical suggestions and advice and making up guidelines like 6 feet distancing and masking of children. Do you think that's appropriate? Do the American people deserve to be abused like that, Mr. Fauci? Because you're not doctor, you're Mr. Fauci in my few minutes. No, I don't need your answer. I want to talk about this right here.
Mr. Chairman,
Fauci,
objection.
I reclaim my
Mr.
time.
Objection.
I reclaim my time. I reclaim my time,
Gentlelady will
Mr.
suspend.
Raskin.
Gentlelady will
Point of order.
suspend.
Mr.
Point
Chairman,
of order.
just in terms of the rules of decorum, are we allowed to deny that a doctor is a doctor just because we don't want him to be a doctor?
Yes, because in my time, that man does not deserve to have a license. As a matter of fact, it should be revoked, and he belongs in
Gentlelady will
prison.
suspend. The gentlelady should recognize the doctor as a doctor.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, is this what we have become? Is this what we have devolved into? No decorum.
You know what? We can do that hearing about the poor men that were injected with syphilis, because I support you in that. That's horrific. And this government that
I
does
would
things
urge
like that to
Ms.
Americans doesn't have decorum to the American
Mr.
people.
Chairman,
The gentleman is out of
point of regular order, please.
The gentleman is out of order.
Decorum.
I recognize the point of order. Go ahead with your point of order.
No, I mean, I was going to say what Representative Raskin said. That's completely unacceptable to be able to deny Dr. Fauci, who's here, a respected member of the medical community, his title. And that's actually a personal attack on his character.
And I have instructed her.
He's not respected.
And I've instructed her to address him as a doctor.
I'm not
Gentlelady
addressing
shall
him as
continue.
doctor. Let's talk about
Mr.
this.
Chairman, I
I'm
would move
reclaiming
that the
my
woman's
time. I'm reclaiming my time.
Words get taken
I'm
down.
reclaiming my time.
Second that.
Point of order.
Suspend.
All right.
A member can only move to have words. I'm sorry. The issues we are debating are important ones that members feel deeply about. And while vigorous disagreement is part of the legislative process, as I said at the beginning, members are reminded that we must adhere to established standards of decorum in debate. This is a reminder that it is a violation of House rules and the rules of this committee to engage in personalities regarding other members or to question the motives of a colleague. Remarks of that type are not permitted by the rules and are not in keeping with the best traditions of our committee. The chair will enforce these rules of decorum at all times and urges all members to be mindful of their remarks. Does the gentleman from California have anything further?
We should take her words down.
Yeah, I made it. I offered that her words be taken down, Mr. Chair.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a point of order.
Mr.
Because
Griffin
they
is
accused us
Mr.
of
Griffin is
worshiping
Gentlelady
President
will-
Trump. We don't
Gentlelady-
worship President Trump.
Gentlelady will suspend. Mr. Griffin, you have a point of order.
Mr. Chairman, while it may not be polite, I believe the rule only applies to members of this body, the Senate, and the President of the United States. I do not believe that it applies. The rule on taking down words does not apply to a witness. Again, I'm not condoning the words. I'm just relating or asking whether or not it applies to individuals who are just happen to be here in front of us.
I agree. The chair overrules the point of order by the gentleman from Maryland, but asks that members please afford all other members the respect they're entitled, refrain from using rhetoric that could be construed as an attack on the motives or character of another member or the witness. You may proceed.
Thank you. This was a time in history where you got to throw out the first pitch at the Washington Nationals baseball game while Americans were forced to stay home and watch such events that they love from at home alone on their televisions. And what a hypocrisy this picture shows. Here you are without your mask, with empty seats everywhere. Remember the cardboard cutout fans? That was one of the most insulting things to Americans, having to watch the games from home where you got to go and enjoy the game and sit right next to people not following the 6 feet of distancing, not wearing your mask, and everyone else was forced to stay home and stop enjoying life. And your science here, your science is displayed perfectly in this picture where children Children in school were put in plastic bubbles because of your science, your repulsive, evil science. And let's go back to your very own email. You said earlier you don't use email. Oh, you do. Right here. This is your own email where you said the typical mask you buy in the drugstore is not really effective in keeping out virus. I do not recommend that you wear a mask. This is your email. This is your own words. But yet children all over America were forced to wear masks. Healthy children forced to wear masks, muzzled in their schools. And then they were forced to learn from home because of your so-called science and your medical suggestions, while you and all your cronies get paid from Big Pharma. You know that what this committee should be doing? We should be recommending you to be prosecuted. We should be writing a criminal referral because you should be prosecuted for crimes against humanity. You belong in prison, Dr. Fauci.
Mr. Chairman, I have another point of order.
I recognize Ms. Dingell.
Just want to make sure the record is clear. Dr. Fauci testified that he did not use his personal email for official business. He did not say he did not use email. And I think today, this particular has been full of lies and disregard and disrespect, and we need to stick to facts.
Thank you. The gentlelady's time had expired before the point of order. I now recognize Mr. Garcia from California for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Fauci, I am so sorry you just had to sit through that. That was completely irresponsible. Quite frankly, we're hearing, this might be the most insane hearing I've actually attended. I've only been in Congress for a year and a half, but I am so sorry that you are subjected to those level of attacks and insanity. Your quote-unquote so-called science that the gentlewoman is referring to has saved millions of lives in this country and around the world. And I want to thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. I now recognize Ms. Greene for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Smith, this has been a very engaging, intriguing conversation. I'm a business owner, so I've been listening to this and you know, taking it in and thinking about it through that lens. You started with something that I find impressive. You said you accept responsibility, and I just want to commend you for that. I appreciate it. We don't hear that very often here, but I think it's valuable and I think it's right. So I just wanted to say thank you. I understand that Microsoft has a unique role to play in our cybersecurity landscape, as it's responsible for nearly 85% of the productivity software such as Word, Excel, and PowerPoint used by the U.S. government. Given the company's presence, Microsoft is, of course, at significant risk of cyber attacks. Over 300 million a day? Is that true? 300 million a day?
We detect 300 million a day against our customers. So that's what we get to see, given all of the telemetry we have. Last year, if you look at phishing attacks, we had 47 million against ourselves over the year.
Wow, that's far more than I
It's a lot.
could have even comprehended. And of course, these are serious, and everyone here on the committee is recognizing that. As you stated in your testimony, cyber attacks have become more prolific, just as you stated. And as a result of the attack that your company went under, in May of 2021, the Biden administration released an executive order on improving the nation's cybersecurity, which required the establishment of the Cyber Safety Review Board under DHS. I'd want to talk to you a little bit about the board. I think, of course, oversight is important, but I think there should be more action taken by our government to prevent cyber attacks. So could we talk a little bit about the board? And my understanding is the Cyber Safety Review Board is a mix of government and industry representatives. Is it true that Microsoft is not represented on the board?
That's correct.
Is any of your competitors on the board?
Yes, they are.
So essentially, so how did this work? When this attack happened, the board can you talk a little bit about that process?
Yeah, and you're getting at such a critical question, because I will say first, I think we benefit from having this kind of organized effort. I think it's probably a mistake to put on the board people who work for competitors of, say, a company that is the subject of a review. The spirit of this, when it was created, was to create a community of people who could learn together. But I just don't, I'm less concerned about the way the process worked, and I just worry that where people want to take it in the future and just make hay out of others' mistakes. And I'm just not sure that's going to do us that much good.
Right. So did CSRB, did it share with Microsoft what your competitors said about their own security practices?
I don't believe so. I don't know. I don't believe so. I could be wrong, but I don't believe so.
Okay. And with your competitors on the board helping produce the report, was this used in any other way in the marketplace?
Yeah, and I want to say two things, because first, I think the most important thing for me to do and for Microsoft to do is what you said at the outset. I just want to be here and accept responsibility, and I don't want to deflect any of that responsibility, because we have the highest responsibility. But second, the words that I would offer, and I'll offer it to the folks in the back who work for our competitors, because there's a bunch of them here. It's fine. Go tell people that you have something better, but we have to have a higher cause here. We are not the adversaries with each other, even though we may compete with each other. The adversaries are our foreign foes. So let's try to exercise a little self-restraint about how we work in these processes, because I don't think that the next company that gets an invitation from the CSRB is likely to be necessarily as willing as we were to share everything, which we did.
Well, I agree. I think competition is healthy in
I do too.
in the business world. I think it's great. Actually, I enjoyed it for years and years. But I think oversight is also extremely important. And of course, I think everyone in this room agrees that we do not want any foreign country gathering any of our information, whether it's from an American citizen to our government, of course. CISA is also has a bad reputation, especially among Republicans. They colluded with big tech and social media companies, stripped many Americans of their First Amendment rights. So that was another reason why I wanted to ask you a little bit about the board and how that worked. But furthermore, I have more questions, but I'm out of time. I think it would be extremely important for there to be assistance from the federal government in protecting not only companies like yours, but mom and pop companies. I mean, across the board to regular citizens from cyber attacks. It's a serious problem, and it will continue. I'm out of time. Thank you.
The gentlelady yields. I now.
But Chair now recognizes Ms. Greene from Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Americans have been enslaved in $34.8 trillion in debt. And one of the reasons is because of the reckless spending of the Biden administration, all due to climate cultist beliefs that they have got to regulate and spend hard-earned tax dollars in order to control the climate. The Biden administration's cumulative new regulatory costs imposed surpass all of his predecessors. According to analysis of the administration's own published cost estimates, as of May 17, 2024, the administration had already imposed $1.6 trillion in new regulatory costs. That $1.6 trillion is almost the entire budget for 1 year for the federal government. These costs are several times higher than the costs imposed during the entire 8 years of the Obama administration, and they are over $1.7 trillion greater than those imposed during the Trump administration. As of May 2024, the EPA had on its own imposed $1.3 trillion of the Biden administration's total new regulatory cost, over 80%. An estimated $870 billion of these costs are attributable to the EPA's light and medium duty EV rule. But even the remaining 400 plus billion in new costs are substantially equivalent to all new regulatory costs imposed through the Obama administration. Mr. Reagan, you unveiled a new rule this year, a climate regulation. The rule's designed to ensure that the majority of new passenger cars and light trucks sold in the United States are all electric or hybrids by 2032, and that's approximately 8 years from now. This is an absurd regulation on tailpipe emissions limits imposed by the EPA. Inflation is so high right now, so high. Many Americans aren't able to even buy a new car right now. They're not able to buy a home. They can hardly afford their rent. I know many senior citizens in my district are having to choose between rent and being able to pay for their medications. This is absolutely unreal that this would be a rule imposed on Americans to the point where they would have, within 8 years, are they even going to be able to buy a car? Think about that. Think about hardworking families. Parents both working with their kids. They're just trying to get through life. And this rule that you have imposed is going to force them to, because of the tailpipe emissions, have to buy an electric vehicle. So I don't think many Americans are going to be able to do that. And it's going to drastically crush Americans who, by the way, pay your paycheck, pay my paycheck, pay for this federal government. It's outrageous. Right now, we have an EV euphoria is dead. Automakers are scaling back or delaying their electric vehicle plans. 7.6 of new cars and trucks sold are electric vehicles because nobody wants them. And then let's add on the reality of electric vehicles. Electric vehicles add 1,000 pounds or more per vehicle. That causes damage to roads, bridges, and parking garages. I want you all to imagine for just 1 minute a parking garage that has been built to hold the weight of combustion engine cars and trucks. And imagine a parking garage filled with electric vehicles. It cannot sustain that weight, and neither can many roads and bridges. Electric vehicles are too heavy. There's 2,000 pounds in 1 ton. The Delaware Bridge, for example, has a weight limit of 3 tons. So there's several EVs on the market right now that already exceed that limit for that bridge, for that one bridge. One electric vehicle exceeds the limit, the weight limit for that bridge. Tesla Model X, Audi e-tron, BMW, e-Hummer, and Rivian. Some of these electric vehicles exceed 8,000-pound limits on some of these roads. Because of the rules that you are imposing, this is going to crush Americans' ability to even be able to afford a car and send us back into the time before people could afford cars, and I can't even imagine that. In Georgia alone, we had the electric vehicle car Rivian. They're now delaying construction of a $5 billion factory in Georgia. This is a complete catastrophe, Mr. Reagan. It's a complete catastrophe, and it needs to be undone. The EPA regulations are unsustainable for Americans, and believe me, Republicans want clean air and water too, but the climate cult has got to end. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Recognizes Ms. Marjorie Taylor Greene from Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Cheadle, I'd like to remind you that you're under oath. The site team has a senior supervisor, an advanced team, a protective intelligence team, a counter sniper element, and detail. Who was the agent in charge? How long has she been the agent in charge? And what is her Secret Service background?
So I'm not going to provide a name.
Why not? You're here to answer our questions.
This forum, I'm not going to provide names of.
You stated in your testimony, you said, I am here today to answer your questions.
That is correct.
Answer the question.
I'm not going to provide names of our personnel.
Why not?
Today.
The American people are demanding these answers from you today, Ms. Cheadle.
I will do the best to provide you accurate information based on the facts that I have at this time.
You're not answering our questions. The advance element coordinates with other intel or law enforcement partners, identifies threats and weaknesses at the sites and movements. We'd like a copy of the advance report. Have you brought it here with you today?
We will comply with the request for the documentation that has been requested.
When will that be, Ms. Cheadle? Because you should have brought it today.
I am certain that our personnel are working on obtaining all of that documentation.
I don't believe you, and neither do the people watching this hearing. You're not doing well, as Mr. Moskowitz informed you. You've been sitting here for over 3 hours, and I have you know the entire country is demanding you resign and demanding that you be fired if you do not resign. Things are not going well for you. You need to answer the questions. Was there a protective intelligence team, and what technical resources were utilized for that event, specifically drone or helicopter assets?
There were a number of technical assets that were deployed for that event, and there was a protective intelligence team that was assigned to that event.
Why was Crooks able to fly a drone over the entire area the day of the rally and the day of his assassination attempt?
To my knowledge, he did not fly the drone over the entire area.
How did he fly a drone over the area, period? Any part of the area?
Again, I would have to go back and check the timeline of when that took place and when the event...
Why didn't you bring the timeline with you today to answer our questions?
I don't have all of the answers on the timelines based on the criminal investigation.
Were you not prepared today to answer our questions?
I am prepared to answer the questions based on the information and wanted to be able to provide.
Do you have a timeline that do you have a timeline at all from any of the day?
I have a timeline that does not have specifics.
That's shocking. That is absolutely unacceptable. That means you are a failure at your job. Let's talk about things that are prohibited in Trump rallies. And I've been to a lot of Trump rallies. Backpacks and bags, bicycles, firearms, any type of weapon, or any other item determined to be a potential safety hazard, like a rangefinder would be one. At 5:10, Crooks is first observed by one of the snipers, AGR Sniper 1, at the building. 5:10, President Trump was shot in the face at 6:11 p.m. 5:28, AGR Sniper 1 takes a picture of a bicycle and 2 bags. Those belong to Crooks. 5:32, AGR Sniper 1 spots Crooks looking at his phone and using a rangefinder. 5:55, Butler ESU Command confirms receipt of photos and states they have been relayed on. 6:05 p.m., AGR Sniper 1 later communicates that Crooks is seen moving northeast in direction of Sheets and that Crooks has a backpack. 2 minutes before the shooting, while President Trump has been allowed to take the stage, people see Crooks laying on his stomach in a sniper position on the roof, and they're yelling he has a gun, and they are trying to alert law enforcement and Secret Service. Why was Crooks not shot by the snipers? Why was he allowed to be there?
As soon as the individual was identified as a threat, they were...
No. What do you consider to be a threat? A man with a gun laying in a sniper position, a man that had a backpack, a man that had a bicycle, a man that had a rangefinder. At what point is he determined a threat?
An individual with a backpack is not a threat. An individual with a rangefinder is not a threat.
What about a man laying on a building that has direct line of sight of President Trump with a gun that people are screaming and pointing out? Is that a threat, Ms. Cheadle?
Once that individual was identified, they were neutralized.
No, they were neutralized. Crooks was neutralized after he shot President Trump in the face, Ms. Cheadle. Is he only a threat once he fires the weapon?
As soon as the counter sniper identified that individual, they were able to neutralize them.
How were people in the crowd? Okay, then let's just take it this way. People under your command did not consider him to be a threat, yet people in the crowd knew he had a gun and considered him to be a threat. That means that you are a complete failure as the director of the Secret Service, that people under your command don't perceive a man laying on a roof with direct line to the president with a gun. They don't perceive that to be a threat, yet the people in the crowd do. How is that possible?
That's the last question, but please answer the question, Ms. Director.
I'm not certain at this time how the information from the people in the crowd was relayed to any law enforcement personnel.
No, you knew, that everyone knew. The people there knew that there was a danger. They knew there was a threat to President Trump, and it was allowed to happen. Was there a stand-down order, Ms. Cheadle? No. Was there a conspiracy to kill President Trump?
Absolutely not.
Then how did this happen? And why are you still sitting here not turning in your letter of resignation?
Last question, but please answer, and then I'll recognize Ms. Presley. Please answer that question.
That is what we are investigating to determine.
We're waiting for your letter. We are waiting for your letter of resignation, and you really need to consider doing that before you leave today.
Chair now recognizes Ms. Presley from Massachusetts.
Thank you. No one.
Right?
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize Ms. Greene from Georgia for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Cuomo, I'd like to remind you that you're under oath. You've said a lot today. In your opening statement, you attacked President Trump and his response. I'd also like to remind you of statements that you've said. On April 13th of 2020 on the Howard Stern Show, you said, and I quote, "Trump has delivered for New York." He has. And then you talked about Trump sending the ship, the comfort ship. Mind you that the comfort ship was sent to New York on March 30th of 2020. That was just a few days after you signed the directive to put COVID-19 patients into nursing homes on March 25th, which led to murdering people's parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents. Yes, murdering them. Today you said, and I'll quote you, you said that high deaths in nursing homes is a conspiracy theory. Would you like to turn to the people here in this room today whose mothers died and their fathers died in these nursing homes and call them conspiracy theorists? Do you have the audacity to do that, Mr. Cuomo?
I never said that, Congresswoman.
You said that today. You're under oath.
I never
there
said
is video. There's video of all of your words today.
I never
You
said
can be
that.
fact-checked. We'll do that when this is over.
Yeah.
You also blamed staff for spreading COVID in nursing homes, not COVID patients. You blamed the staff. But yet on March 25th, I didn't ask you a question. I'm talking to you. On March 25th, you signed a directive to put COVID-19 patients into nursing homes. On March 30th, President Trump sent the comfort ship, and you did not put COVID patients in the comfort ship. You didn't send them to the Javits Medical Center that President Trump had built, which was a field hospital. You didn't send them there. You put them in nursing homes, which is murder.
That's not.
No, that's murdering people. I'm saying that right now, and I'm also saying what a lot of people believe what your actions did. Let's also talk about some other things that you've done. Mr. Cuomo, let's talk about a tweet that you made because there's an indictment out on a woman named Linda Sun. Linda Sun, and I'll read this indictment. It says on April 4th, politician number one publicly thanked PRC official number one, both in public remarks and in a post on Twitter, that's this right here, for helping arrange the donation which was scheduled to arrive at JFK Airport in Queens, New York that day. So, Mr. Cuomo, you were thanking China, the PRC, while you had a woman named Linda Sun working for you, who has now been identified as a Chinese spy. Now, today you have come before the American people in our committee You have insulted many people, including people in this room and people watching this hearing who lost their loved ones because of your March 25th directive. And at the same time, you were thanking the Chinese government while you had a Chinese spy working for you. So, Mr. Cuomo, I've read a lot about you, including the fact that 13 women that work for you accused you of sexually inappropriate behavior, which, thanks to the Democrat DOJ, helped you out of that. But I'd like to say this, and I'll ask you, are you either the dumbest tool of the Chinese government, or did you know for a fact that you were being used by the Chinese spy that was working for you?
I've read a lot about you too, Congresswoman. I think this is a very serious matter. About
it is serious. That's right.
Matter. She was a junior member in my team. I wouldn't recognize her if she was in this room today. But I think it is a serious matter. I don't think this was just in New York. I think there is an infiltration of Chinese, maybe Russian operatives.
The Democrat Party's definitely had a problem with Chinese spies. Yes, you're right. And I want to remind you, you're under oath.
Yeah. And I think it's a serious issue, and I think the federal government and the state government should work together on it. The state government doesn't really have the ability to do the international reconnaissance, but the federal government does, and I think they should work together to make sure they're doing the best they can to do the vetting.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to enter the indictment for the record.
So ordered.
Thank you.
I now recognize Dr. Jackson from Texas for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for holding this important hearing today and the opportunity to hold.
The gentleman from New Jersey. The chair now recognizes the gentlewoman from Georgia, Ms. Greene.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since the start of the 118th Congress, our committee has been laser focused on securing our border and stopping the flow of illegal migration and illegal narcotics. The Coast Guard plays a significant role in DHS's posture on the maritime border. Most of us have seen videos on social media of Coast Guard boarding teams seizing drug boats and stopping boats overladen with migrants attempting to illegally enter the United States. We're thankful to the Coast Guard and the hard work that they do on behalf of the United States. Admiral Fagan, on average, how many illegal aliens does the Coast Guard interdict in a year?
The number of interdictions that we encounter at sea has varied significantly year to year. This year to date, the numbers have been quite low in comparison to previous years. Happy to have the staff come over and walk you through 3 to 5 years worth of maritime migration interdiction numbers. Creating on-water presence helps prevent that flow, and also policy clarity with regard to consequences for illegal attempts to migrate also have significant impact on whether the numbers are up or down. Weather gets a vote too.
Right, certainly understood. Thank you. We'd probably take you up on that offer. I would appreciate it. What countries are the most frequent countries where people are illegally trying to enter the United States?
I'll speak to the maritime migration flows. The typical nationalities encountered at sea are Haiti and Cuba. There are some onesie, twosies, and again, can walk through all that, but primarily at sea, it's Haiti and Haitians and Cubans.
On average, how many drug boats does the Coast Guard intercept every year? I know you may not have the number in front of you.
Our counter-narcotics mission work in the Eastern Pacific and in the Caribbean is critical. It, too, is life-saving work, preventing narcotics from reaching the streets of the United States and resulting in overdoses. And this is a line of effort that we work in conjunction with other allies and our DoD partners. And we continue to interdict primarily cocaine, but some marijuana as well at sea. That is work that Coast Guard members are doing right now as we sit in this hearing room. And again, can walk you through those annual reports and numbers. But it's critical life-saving and national security work we do on behalf of the nation.
Well, we thank the Coast Guard for that. On average, how many pounds of narcotics does the Coast Guard seize every year? That's pretty much what you just alluded to, cocaine, and mostly cocaine, you said? And some marijuana?
The majority that we see at sea in the maritime flow is cocaine, but we are also seeing marijuana, and occasionally we'll find some fentanyl or methanol. Again, happy to walk you through all, and it varies year to year, month to month.
Of the total migrant and drug boats that sail from Central and South America, or Cuba or Haiti, what percentage does the Coast Guard interdict with, and what percentage evades detection?
So when we detect a migrant venture, we work then to follow it and interdict at sea. The ability to detect particularly vessels that are not on the high seas can be a challenge. When we detect the vessel, we move to interdict. I don't have offhand what the estimate on number of interdictions versus number of getaways, but can work that. Again, life-saving work to ensure people don't lose their lives as they make these incredibly hazardous journeys at sea.
How many migrants do lose their lives? I would imagine there's some that don't make it.
Yeah, our goal is to prevent that loss of life, but there have been loss of life in the maritime flows, and again, we're happy to share what the estimates are, and that as well varies year to year.
Dangerous job for the Coast Guard as well. Has there been loss of life for members of the Coast Guard?
We have been very fortunate that our members have not been killed, but it is dangerous work. We continue to ensure we've got the right training and policy and procedures to mitigate that risk, but it is work that we happily do on behalf of the nation, and we'll continue to lean into, and I'm committed to ensuring my workforce has all the tools and training they need to do it safely.
Thank you, Admiral Fagan. I yield back.
Sheriff Hathaway, for 5 minutes to summarize his opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Greene and Ranking Member Thompson, for inviting me to testify to your committee. I am the sheriff of a county in Arizona, a border county. My county has the largest ports of entry with Mexico. Of all the border counties in Arizona, a large commercial port of entry, 2 large pedestrian ports of entry, a passenger vehicle port of entry, a railroad port of entry. So we have the largest volume of movement of any border county in Arizona. And our community is very safe. Crime rates are low. Crime rates are lower than the average for the state of Arizona, lower than Tucson, lower than Phoenix. But I do have concern over the growing police state and surveillance state in the U.S. Border Patrol has what is called extended border search authority. We call this the Constitution-free zone. Any area within 100 miles of the international border, Border Patrol does not need to have probable cause to search, to detain you, to interrogate you. And this includes 2/3 of the population of the U.S., cities like San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, Seattle, Washington, D.C., Miami, Houston. But our border community is safe, but there are things that Congress can do, and you need to act. If you don't act, presidential administrations will use executive action to solve these problems. In the current and the former administration, the executive branch is incentivized to come up with solutions because Congress has not acted. We have talked for years about comprehensive, immigration reform. There are things that can be done. First of all, we need to have a robust guest worker program. Title VIII needs to be revamped. Title VIII is the umbrella United States code that covers all aspects of immigration, asylum, visas. I have empathy for our federal partners because they don't know what they're allowed to do. They don't know, do we still have work visas, student visas, tourist visas? All the protocols with everything to do with the border are unclear. This is something Congress needs to define, make these hard decisions. And the asylum program is not the answer. Asylum was meant to be a little piece of the pie of Title VIII. for rare circumstances. Asylum, it's become the de facto way of issuing work permits, but asylum seekers can't even work for the first 6 months they're in the country. Canada is smart, and they've realized, hey, they've imported tens of thousands of cleared asylum seekers into Canada to work there because they can't work here. They have the same problem we do. They have an aging population. They lack younger workers, and they've taken advantage of this kind of broken system to get more workers into their country. So I want to keep my 5 minutes simple here. Two clear takeaways that I think Congress needs to do so that the executive branch isn't incentivized to take action. One is a guest worker program. Make that clear, articulate that, figure that out. Consider things like the Farm Modernization Act that has languished for years. There has been pressure from the business community on both sides of the aisle, Republican and Democrat, to pass the Farm Modernization Act that would allow more H-2A agricultural visas. My family is a ranching family. We've been in the border of Arizona for 5 generations. It was a lot easier for my grandfather to hire somebody from Mexico if American workers weren't available. But now it's unclear what the protocols are for getting work permits. Another thing that's needed, and this was in the bipartisan border bill that wasn't passed, is immigration judges right at the border. And this was in the bill. There were some things in that bill I did not agree with. But if we're going to be, infatuated with the idea everyone needs a piece of paper to approve before they can do a voluntary interaction with an American, well, get the officials right at the border that can make those decisions. The bipartisan border bill actually had in it the paralegals, the immigration judges, and the staff, so that people can come up to the border, present their piece of paper, make their claim, and if the answer is yes, it's yes. If the answer is no, it's no. And this is not a Democrat versus Republican issue. In the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, you had record years, over 1 million. This included Democrat and Republican administrations, and then there was a 14-year lull after that included all 8 years of Obama, last 2 years of Bush Jr., and all 4 years of Trump. So this is a cyclical thing, and I think it's disingenuous to try to paint it as a Democrat versus Republican thing. My time's up, so thank you.
Thank you. Members, will we...
The gentlelady recognized for question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really like this chart. As a matter of fact, it's become one of my favorite charts because not only does it speak to the truth of the serious daily and yearly border invasion into our country, this chart also saved President Trump's life when he was almost assassinated in a rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, when a would-be assassin fired at President Trump, bullets flying into the crowd, killing Corey Comprator, but also grazing President Trump's ear as he turned his head to look at this chart and inform the American people about the invasion our country has been under. But the American people are suffering it every single day. Sheriff Hathaway, I thoroughly read and listened to your statement, and you have such an important job as a sheriff in a county that borders the United States and Mexico. And I read where you said, my wife and I live near the border and we walk every night along the border. My county is the largest ports of entry with Mexico of all of Arizona border counties. It is peaceful and safe. Ms. Marin, do you feel safe and peaceful?
No. I actually have nightmares even still.
I'm sorry, and I'm so sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
We mourn with you. I was appalled when I read that, especially given the fact with your port of entry that's in your county, by the way, Sheriff. Let's talk about what that CBP One app has done. It was introduced in January of 2023, and approximately 813 illegal aliens have been paroled into American communities in all 50 states, with 96% of the aliens they are released in, 96% of the ones that come to ports of entry by making a handy-dandy appointment on an app that the Biden administration has provided to anyone all over the world, by the way. We can carry on and talk about the other outrageous thing that helps maybe you feel peaceful at night as you and your wife walk along. People aren't coming across maybe on your land because they're able to go to ports of entry. Another way they're able to get into our country is by flying in from other countries. 530,000 inadmissible aliens have flown directly into U.S. airports. Maybe that's why you don't see a giant flow across your land, Sheriff. You also said it makes me laugh when people talk about fighting age males coming into the United States. It's appalling that you said that, because I would have you know there have been at least 73,000 special interest aliens arrested at our border. 73,000. Special interest aliens are from nations that promote terrorist activity, harbors terrorists, and pose a security threat to the United States. Terrorist. That is fighting age males. Terrorist. Those are armies. Terrorist. Those are the same people that want Israel wiped off the map and would like to destroy America. 73,000. Yes, Americans have a right to fear that. Don't laugh about that. That's extremely serious. Jobs. Let's talk about jobs. You were saying jobs. They want to come in and they're pursuing jobs. Oh, the cartels are getting jobs, all right. Cartels and coyotes are currently making around $13 billion a year in human trafficking. Our wide open border is definitely providing jobs. 26 times more than that of the previous administration under President Trump. The Mexican cartels employ an estimated 175,000 members and have associates, facilitators, and brokers in all 50 states in our country. Yeah, we're having jobs provided for these people. You said certain policies smack of racism. For example, walls. I'd have you know, Sheriff, there are 77 major border walls around the world. 45 countries are planning and building more. Walls are not racist. Walls keep people safe. And this country is not safe. People are being murdered every day. The woman you're sitting next to's daughter was raped and brutally murdered. That's not funny. Walls are not racist. Just within the past 2 weeks, there was an illegal alien driving his car over 100 miles per hour in my hometown, struck another car, critically injuring a baby, killing the baby's mother and the passenger in the car. That happens almost every day in our country because of illegal aliens coming in. It's not funny. It is not racist. And the American people have every right to be fed up, just like they are. Fed up and disgusted that our country is not keeping them safe. And guess what? They freaking pay for it. Their tax dollars pay for it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield.
The gentlelady yields. Mr. Goldman, the gentleman from New York, is recognized for questioning for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Ms. Greene, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. This is such an important hearing today, talking about terrorism. The definition of terror is a feeling of extreme fear. And it's a very sad day that we live in, that many Americans are living with a feeling of extreme fear. Currently, as it stands right now, the Biden administration does not make known the number of special interest aliens on the Department of Homeland Security website. This is a very concerning figure and statistic that they are hiding from the American people. There have been at least 73,000 special interest aliens arrested at our border. That's a number we know because it was leaked to the media. The number is likely far higher now, but we don't know that information because it does not exist and it is not provided to the American people who, by the way, fund the Department of Homeland Security through their taxes. Special interest aliens are from a nation that promotes terrorist activity, harbors terrorists, or poses a security threat to the United States. This does not include the potential special interest aliens among the 2 million, over 2 million known gotaways. So while we've caught at least 73,000 or more at the border, there are another over 2 million we have no idea who they are, where they are, and what they're planning to do in our country. This comes along with the statistic that we've been provided that there have been 388 illegal aliens on the terrorist watch list caught crossing between ports of entry since fiscal year 2021. This compares to only 14 that were caught between fiscal year 2017 and 2020 under the Trump administration. I have a very important bill that, if passed and signed into law, this bill would make the number of special interest aliens and countries of origin publicly available on the Department of Homeland Security website for the American people. Dr. Brown, do you agree that the American people deserve to know that number?
Yes.
Mr. Healy, do you agree they deserve to know?
Absolutely, yes.
Mr. Narasta, do you agree that the American people deserve to know how many special interest aliens are crossing into our country?
The American people deserve to know that, and any other number you can get out of them.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I would also like to take just a few minutes to talk about terror and the extreme feeling of fear. That's extreme fear. The American people are living with fear from the amount of people that have come across our border, and they have good reason to do so. There are approximately an average of 300 Americans that are killed every single day from fentanyl poisoning. That's certainly something to fear. There are Americans that die daily from illegal alien crime and murder. Just in the past 2 weeks, there was a mother of 3 children and a passenger in her car were killed in a car wreck from an illegal alien that struck them at over 100 miles per hour. These are also credible reasons to fear the illegal alien immigration coming across our border. However, I was quite concerned, Mr. Narasta, to hear you talk about over 3,000 Americans that have been murdered in the past decades, and you called that a small and manageable statistic. I would argue that every single one of those lives should never have been killed. And I know that you call yourself, self-described, radical advocate for open borders. That's on your Wikipedia page, but maybe Wikipedia is not always right.
I didn't say it.
However, I would self-describe myself as a radical advocate for safe and secure borders. And I think it's extremely important to make sure that all of us are on the same page for that, because not one life that has been murdered by a terrorist could be considered small and manageable. I'd also like to talk for just a minute, if you will, and ask you, will you consider, when you're talking about jobs, and we agree jobs are important, the economy's important. Now, the cartels are making over $13 billion a year with their jobs coming into our country, selling drugs, making money off of human trafficking. Would you argue that those jobs are important in our economy, cartel jobs?
No, and I think the federal government should stop subsidizing them, and they should stop subsidizing them by radically expanding legal immigration so you can kill those cartels in the same way that Congress killed the mafia when it ended prohibition.
So you're advocating for wide open borders so that cartels can come in and sell drugs into our country. I have you know in Georgia,
legalizing immigration.
Mr. Narasta, legalized immigration. Mr. Narasta, you are wanting to open the borders and legalize cartels selling drugs. In Georgia, we have a serious issue of cartels putting drugs inside our food supply. And therefore, when things like lettuce and watermelons come across the U.S.-Mexican border and make their way to the farmers market in Georgia, they are finding gigantic shipments of methamphetamines, cocaine, actually stuffed in shipments of things like watermelon, lettuce, and celery. This is extremely dangerous for people, restaurant owners, people that consume this. This is extremely dangerous. And so you're wanting to open and
Ms. Green.
legalize these jobs in the United States?
No, I want to, those are consequences of black market.
All right, sir, I'm sorry, Ms. Green's
Yeah.
time's
Thank you,
expired.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Goldman, sir, you're recognized.